Okay.
All right, happy to help. What can I do?
Okay. How do politicians see science?
I think it depends on the education that they've had and the issues that face their state or their district. By and large, every office that I've gone into understands the value of science and the need for continued federal funding of science. There seems to be a disagreement on some of the ways that federal dollars are invested in science. But by and large, everyone believes in the value of science and that the value of geoscience brings to the world.
Are they kind of bored by people talking about science?
Oh, no. Because there are so very few members of Congress that have a science background, either through an education or through a work program, there are so very few members of Congress that have a science background. They rely upon constituents and individuals that come in who are well-versed in science to educate their staff and themselves on the needs and the issues that science can help address.
So is it true that your role is to build a bridge in between the community of scientists and the community?
Personally, I myself see myself as sort of a translator. I take scientists who are so well versed and so knowledgeable about what they do, but not as knowledgeable how laws are made. And I listen to what they have to say, and I hear their concerns, and I hear their issues. Then I take them to go meet with members of Congress and their staff, and I can translate that into policy language so that the members of Congress understand what it is we need the government to do. We need a bill that helps this program. We need more funding to accomplish this goal. Those are things that I can help translate the science into policy speak, and everybody gets what they want.
But aren't politicians asking somebody to help them translate what the scientists they say, or are more scientists that they try to find somebody to be translated into a jargon that the politicians they understand?
I think it could be a little bit of both. Most offices try to have someone in their staff that has science background or has science issues, especially if that member of Congress sits on a science-related committee. If that member of Congress sits on a science-related committee, they often try to get a fellow, someone who is a scientist, who has a PhD in a program, who will come be a member of their staff and sort of act as that science resource for the office. If the senator or the congresswoman doesn't have a science-related committee posting and doesn't have a staffer that has a science background, then they do rely upon their constituents and members of the scientific community to come in and explain the situation to them, explain the science, explain the value of the science, what it can do, what problem does it solve, why is it important?
And what do you actually do practically, pragmatically?
Well, I bring scientists in to Washington, D.C. to meet with their members of Congress. I make sure that the members of Congress realize that these people are resources for them, that they can be called upon to answer questions or anything in particular that they may need further information on, that these scientists are there as a resource for them. I provide them the access to the data that they need to produce the legislation that impacts the geoscience community. I raise the issues by going into members' offices and saying, hey, we really do need a bill that addresses this issue, or case in point with the Earthquake Hazards Program, go into the offices and say, this is a fabulous program that's been around since the late 70s. It needs to be reauthorized. How can I help you achieve that goal? How can you help me achieve that goal? And find interested members of Congress who would be willing to take on the challenge of reauthorizing that bill.
And how is it possible that the politicians, they listen to you? What do you do?
I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing, especially earthquake science and things like that, I've been doing for a while. So I have a reputation amongst members of Congress and some staff, and it's walking in with a compelling story. Even if it's somebody with whom I've never met or an office that we've not gone into before, it's having a compelling story.
What is the most important thing? The compelling story or the reputation?
Oh, I'd say a compelling story. I'd say a compelling story. I try to make sure that everyone with whom I meet remembers a little bit about why it is that I was there. A tidbit, a bit of information about their district, a bit of information about their state.
What is an example of compelling story that you have in your mind, something that you leave behind when you talk with them?
Oh, okay, there's an example. We were very interested in developing an earthquake early warning program for the United States. It's one of the countries that doesn't have a program. Japan has a very robust earthquake early warning. Other countries across the globe have an earthquake early warning system, and we as in America, we don't have one. So when we go in and we talk about how the earthquake early warning can provide a bit of time for people to protect themselves and stop possibly destructive things, we talk about someone going in for surgery and an earthquake early warning alarm going off in the operating suite in the hospital, allowing the surgeon to lift the scalpel before the shaking starts so that no artery is cut, or if you're getting LASIK eye surgery so that the laser doesn't inadvertently, end your sight. The ability to have 10, 15 seconds of warning of ground shaking coming in your direction and allow a surgeon to lift his hands can save a life.
What is the most difficult thing in your daily work?
The pressing time. There is so much to get done and so little time to do it in. There are so few legislative days to meet with members and move a piece of legislation forward. Their calendars are full, and the larger, more pressing concerns are weighing on the minds of all elected members of Congress, and it's hard to get a bit of their time.
Is it true that the scientists, they don't really get this kind of super fast pace?
I think it depends on where the scientist is working, or it depends on what the scientist is working on. I think scientists as a whole are very deliberative, and sometimes that deliberation can take too much time, and we run out of legislative activity or legislative desire if they take too long to respond to an inquiry or too long to get the information to a member of Congress. So I think sometimes their deliberation can be difficult to overcome, but they're very facts-based, exact. They like to be accurate. They like to be complete in their analysis, and that takes time. And recognizing that, I try my best to help them and say, well, if we just need this part today, and the rest of it we can work on, but we need this part today.
Elizabeth, you said something, I quote, "Until you inform your representatives, they don't know."
Well, I think the biggest value that people that participate in these events like GeoCVD, the biggest value is they are voters in that state or voters in that congressional district, and they come in and they tell their story. And until they go in and sit across from a staffer and convey that story and why it's important to them and what value it adds not only to the state but maybe to the nation, the staff doesn't know how passionate they are, how committed they are to their science. The staff doesn't know that personal connection and may not know that factual information either. So it's really valuable for participants in things like GeoCVD to come in and take the time to meet with their member of Congress. It carries a lot of weight that you as a constituent took time and spent your time and resources to come to Washington, D.C. to speak to them, shows them how committed you are to your process.
Do you want to suggest something to all these guys that are listening to you, coming from the
Get
position
involved.
you have?
Get involved. It's not enough just to participate in the March for Science. It's being an advocate for your science is something you need to commit to on a monthly basis.
Thank you very much.
You're very
Elizabeth.
welcome.